بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. Inshallah, in today's talk about the life of Uthman bin Affan radiallahu anh, which is the part 6 of our talk on the life of Uthman radiallahu anh. We will talk about first about a little bit brief summary of last week's talk that what we covered, and then in today's talk we will talk about some of the things that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioned about Uthman bin Affan radiallahu anh, that includes the glad tidings of the Jannah that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam gave to Uthman bin Affan, including other Sahaba ridwanullah alayhim ajma'in. And also within that, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, what he said about the haya or the modesty of the life of Uthman bin Affan radiallahu anh. And then we will talk about what Rasulullah said about the turmoil or the fitna that was going to happen in the Khilafah of Uthman bin Affan. And it is important for us to pay attention to that part as well, besides the rest of it, inshallah. As far as the last week goes, we talked about two aspects of Uthman's life. One was his social life in Medina. And as I mentioned previously as well, right now we are going over his life during the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then we will talk about his life during the time of Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anhu when he was a Khalifa, and then during the era or the time period when Umar bin Khattab was a Khalifa, and then we'll talk about his own Khilafah when he was the ruler of the Islamic State at that time. Okay, so last week or last session that we had in talk, we talked about his social life in Medina that included his marriage to Kulthum radiallahu anha, the second daughter who was married to Uthman bin Affan radiallahu anh. We already talked about his marriage to Ruqayyah before, and then we talked about when we talked about the time of the Badr in the battlefields when Ruqayyah radiallahu anha, the daughter of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, passed away, and then we talked about how Kulthum was married to Uthman bin Affan radiallahu anh, and how Umar bin Khattab offered Uthman to marry his daughter Hafsa radiallahu anha, who also lost her husband around the same time when Kulthum, Uthman bin Affan, he lost Ruqayyah radiallahu anha. And then we talked about the death of Abdullah bin Uthman, the son of Uthman radiallahu anhu, who was the son through Ruqayyah radiallahu anha, the daughter of Rasulullah, who passed away. We talked about who passed away before. Now Abdullah was passed away, and we talked about then look how Uthman bin Affan went through very difficult times in his life. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tests different people differently according to their capacity, their strength that Allah has given. And of course, the Anbiya, the prophets, were the one who were tested the most severest, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, mentioned in one of the ahadith when he was asked about who are the one who are tested the most severest, and then according to their deen. And Uthman was no different than others in this manner, that he had to go through difficult times given by his uncle when he became a Muslim, and then he had to migrate to Habasha, and after Habasha he migrated to Medina as well for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, where he lost his wife and then his son also now. So there was a test from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to Uthman radiallahu anhu. Then we talked about his economic contributions that included how he spent to buy the well of Ruma, which was one of the basic necessity for the Muslims who were in Medina to get the fresh water. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioned about him that he will be in the Jannah. Anybody who will do this act, Rasulullah said, and Uthman is the one who fulfilled this act of buying it and using it for the sake of for the ummah, he will be enter into Jannah. So Rasulullah talked about him being people of Jannah for that sake. And then when the expansion of Masjid al-Nabawi was required at that time, Uthman was again the one who was the leading personality who spent in the path of Allah. And then of Tabuk, the generosity of Uthman was there as well. We talked about twice last week and before when we were talking about the battlefields as well, his role in battlefields. And he was the one who basically, majority of the help came from Uthman bin Affan, who equipped the army from his wealth. And Allah Azza wa Jal gave blessed him with a lot of wealth in this dunya, and his wealth was well used in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam again mentioned about Uthman that from today day on, Uthman can do anything and nothing will harm him. And he is one of the people of the Jannah. So besides what we'll talk about today as well, about him being the people of Jannah, there were other times when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioned, and we're not going to talk about that aspect of what Rasulullah said about him during the battlefield or during the social life and economic life, because these things were already covered in the previous lectures. Today we'll talk about, besides that, there are other things where Uthman bin Affan radiallahu anh was given the glad tidings by Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam about the Jannah. And let's not forget that aspect of it. When we talk about Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioned to him about being the people of Jannah, or he gave certain news about the future, or we call them prophecies about the future, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was not the carrier of the ghaib, only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from that knowledge gave to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam conveyed to us. Okay, so Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is the one who conveyed whatever Allah showed to him and gave the knowledge about. Now, about Uthman bin Affan being given this glad tidings regarding being one of the people of Jannah, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in one of the hadith, which is reported by Abu Musa al-Ash'ari radiallahu anh, and he mentioned that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam entered a garden, and he said he told Abu Musa al-Ash'ari to guard Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam there, guard his gate, and a man came and asked for permission to enter, and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said to adhin lahu wa bashirhu bil jannah, that allow him to enter into that garden and give him the glad tidings of the Jannah. And then when it was looked at who the person was, it was Abu Bakr Siddiq radiyallahu anhu. And then ثم جاء آخر يستأذنه, and then somebody else came after that and asked for the permission, and Rasulullah again said that to adhan lahu wa bashirhu bil jannah, that allow him, give him the permission and give him the glad tidings of Jannah. Okay, then this time it was Umar bin Khattab radiyallahu anhu. And then the third person, again somebody came and asked for permission, and this time again Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam gave him the glad tidings of Jannah, but he gave something more. Adhan lahu wa bashirhu bil jannati ala balwa satusibuhu. So now this one, he said, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that give him and allow him to enter, adhan lahu, allow him to enter, and give him the glad tidings of Jannah, but also he gave something else, that about that this person that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam who allow him to enter, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that admit him and give him the glad tidings of entering paradise with a calamity, a musibah that will befall him. And when it was checked, it was Uthman bin Affan radiallahu anhu. Okay, so Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that here, not only he gave the glad tidings about the Jannah, but also gave something about the future to Uthman, about Uthman bin Affan. What was that? That there is a calamity that is going to happen to Uthman bin Affan. And we will see in the later ahadith that was said about Uthman bin Affan, what was the calamity that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was referring to. But before that, because that's the topic that we'll cover at the end, let's talk about the glad tidings that was given to Uthman bin Affan radiallahu anhu. There's another incident when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and Abu Bakr and Umar and Uthman, they climbed the mountain of Uhud, and Uhud started shaking. When they started shaking, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Uthbut Uhud," that calm down, stay, be firm, Uhud, talking to the mountain. فَإِنَّمَا عَلَيْكَ نَبِيٌّ وَصِدِّيقٌ وَشَهِيدًا. Indeed, there is a prophet and a Siddiq, which is Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anhu, prophet wa Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, wa shahidan. Shahidan means, and the two martyrs are on the mountain of Uhud. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam here is giving a glad tidings about Uthman and Umar being martyred, which means they were the people of the Jannah again. And Siddiq is also a person of the Jannah. Rasulullah approved of him as being the Siddiq. Other thing that was said about Uthman bin Affan was similarly like Uhud. One time Rasulullah was on the mountain of Hira. Yeah. And along with him was Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, Ali, Talha, was Zubayr. Okay, these are the Sahaba. We all know of, well aware of these Sahaba's name. Akabir Sahaba, great Sahaba of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now this mountain is started also shaking, stirring up. Rasulullah says, "Ahda." Ahda means calm down. فَمَا عَلَيْكَ إِلَّا نَبِيٌّ أَوْ صِدِّيقٌ أَوْ شَهِيدٌ. Why? Because on you is a prophet, a Siddiq, with Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu, and Shaheed, the martyrs. Who are the martyrs here? Of course, referring to Uthman, Umar, Ali, Talha, and Zubair. All of them were the martyrs in the future and later on. So again, Uthman bin Affan radiallahu anhu was given a glad tiding of the Jannah again. This is the kind of personality Uthman bin Affan was. Now, when we talk about the haya of Uthman radiallahu anhu, many times we hear in the khutbs that when people are giving for the Salatul Jum'ah, the khutbah is given, and they remember this hadith when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam referred to him as the most sincere one among the one who have the haya, or the modesty that Uthman bin Affan radiallahu anhu. Now, one of the books, which is by Al-Manawi, it says the main characteristic of Uthman is modesty. Uthman radiallahu anhu was famous for his haya, his modesty. But what is that modesty and where is it coming from? That's important. That's what he's mentioning in his book called Faidul Qadir. He says, and modesty results from the great respect for the one who is looking at him, as well as awareness of some faults that he can see in himself. That's the result. So when we talk about the modesty of Uthman, it's not just to say the word modesty, the haya we're talking about. What is causing him to be modest? What is causing him to have this haya? That's the thing that is talking, Al-Manawi is talking about. He is saying that is because of his basically fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one main factor of it that's causing. And then says, it is as if he was overwhelmed by the glory of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and saw in himself some faults and shortcomings. That's what made him modest. Okay, these are the lofty qualities of those who are close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Thus Uthman was raised in status, so the chosen one of Allah's creation, i.e. the prophets, felt a sense of modesty and shyness before him, just as the one who loves Allah loves his close friends, and one who fears Allah will be feared by all. So now here, the shyness that we're referring to is that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam even had the shyness towards Uthman bin Affan radiallahu anh, as we will talk about one of the hadith, that when Uthman came, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he himself was saying that, shouldn't I be modest about him when he comes, because even the malaika are careful about the haya or the modesty of Uthman radiallahu anh. Now, as one of the hadith that we just talked about when Umar came, Abu Bakr came, Umar came, and Uthman came, one of the hadith talks about the continuation of the very same hadith, and it says something like this, that when he came, then one or the two of the knees of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam were uncovered. And when Abu Bakr came, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam just allowed him as is. And when Umar came, he still allowed him to come in. But when Uthman bin Affan came, he covered himself properly, because of the haya of Uthman radiallahu anh. As the hadith says, reported by Bukhari, says, admit him and give him the glad tidings of entering paradise with calamity. And then it talks about that when his knee was showing and he covered it before Uthman came. That was towards his haya of Uthman radiallahu anh. Similar hadith is mentioned about by Aisha radiallahu anha, that she said that Abu Bakr came, Umar came, and then when Uthman came, when first two times, he was in a state that he had some cloak or something of Aisha that he had it on. And then when when Uthman came for his purpose, and the hadith says like there are different wordings about this, but when he came, he sat upright properly and he covered himself, and in a way that he did not have the cloth that would belong to Aisha, and he gave it back to her. So and it was asked by Aisha radiallahu anha, why did you do that when Uthman came? So Rasulullah said, Inna Uthman rajulun hayyun wa inni khashitu in adintu lahu ala tilka al-hal alla yablugha ilayya fi hajatihi. He said, verily Uthman is a person who's very modest, and I was afraid that if he sees me in that state, that as if I was not prepared for him to meet, meaning he was busy with something else, or he was in the house with the family members, he may not even mention his own need. Hence, he properly sat down and put the clothes on properly in a manner that Uthman will not shy away from mentioning his hajjah, his need. This is how Uthman bin Affan was. But think of this way, that this is not a shyness per se. Nowadays, people think of it shyness. As a matter of fact, in the culture and the society that we are living in, this culture and society, which is a result of a secularized world where man is the one who decides what is good and bad, and ends up showing as if being shy is a weakness. They look at it as a weakness, and they look at it as a person who is not shy. He is vocal and he can just say whatever comes to his mind, or he is then they look at him as he is a firm person or something. Not necessarily. Firmness has nothing to do with shyness, by the way. Firmness has nothing to do with shyness. And we'll see Uthman bin Affan, when we talk about modesty, at the same time, when we talk about his firmness, and when we talk about what Rasulullah mentioned to him about the calamity is going to happen to him, and he was aware of the calamity. He was aware of that he will be a shaheed. And at that time, because of what Rasulullah commanded him, he stuck with that command that was given to him. And he did not take any action at that time. And inshallah, we'll cover more when we will talk about how Uthman bin Affan radiallahu anh, when he was martyred. When we come to that topic, we'll cover it more in detail. But it's good to know what exactly Rasulullah said about him, at least what we are aware of. Because there are things that Uthman bin Affan did not disclose because there was a secret from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam to Uthman bin Affan radiallahu anh. But that was his modesty. And another report, when similar thing happened about the clothes and all that, and Uthman's response about when Uthman and Rasulullah's response about Uthman's entering to him while when Abu Bakr and Umar came, and he did not feel modesty towards them as he did in front of Uthman. Rasulullah said, "Ala astahi min rajulin tastahi minhu al-malaika." Should I not show modesty to one whom even the angels show the modesty? This hadith is reported by Imam Muslim. And there are many hadith about the subject of the modesty. And which one of them, as I was saying in the beginning, I was talking about the modesty of Uthman bin Affan, that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioned about some of the Sahaba and their characteristics. Okay, which is one of the things that you hear sometimes in the khutbs, that the khatib gets up for the Jum'ah, and at the end they're making dua. That they said the hadith that Rasulullah said, "Arhamu ummati bi ummati Abu Bakr," talking about Abu Bakr Siddiq and his specific attributes or the characteristics. What was it? The most merciful of my nation is Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anh. وَأَشَدُّ فِيهِمْ أَمْرِ اللَّهِ عُمَرٍ. And the most severe in the sense of stick to the word, what Allah and His Messenger commanded, he would not deter anything away, was Umar bin Khattab radiallahu. And then the hadith goes on, وَأَصْدَقُهُمْ حَيَاءً عُثْمَانٍ. And the most sincere, the truthful one, the one was about the haya of modesty of Uthman radiallahu anh. And then the hadith goes on, وَأَقْرَأُهُمْ لِكِتَابِ اللَّهِ أُبَيْ بِن كَعْبٍ radiallahu anh. And then the best reciter is of the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Ubay bin Ka'b radiallahu anh. Then the hadith of Afradahum Zayd ibn Thabit radiallahu. Afradahum, the further here mentioned is about the knowledge regarding what? Knowledge regarding the inheritance. The one who had the most knowledge about the subject is Zayd bin ثابت رضي الله عنه. And then so عالمهم بالحلال والحرام معاذ bin Jabal رضي الله عنه. That the one who knows most about the halal and the haram is Mu'adh bin Jabal رضي الله عنه. ألا وإن لكل أمة أمينا وإن أمين هذه الأمة أبو عبيدة بن جراح رضي الله عنه. And of course, the other ones talk about the Quda of Ali radiallahu anhu as well. The hadith that I'm talking about is from Jameel Tirmidhi, and it talks about these are the Sahaba. Every nation had an Ameen, the most trustworthy person, and the most trustworthy person of the Ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is Abu Ubaidah bin Jarrah radiallahu anhu. Now we'll move on to the subject that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioned about the turmoil during the Uthman bin Affan radiallahu anhu. Now, what Rasulullah mentioned about it. But before I go into this, I want to make sure to remember these two ayat in reference to this subject. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Araf, قُلْ لَا أَمْلِكُ لِنَفْسِي نَفْعًا وَلَا ضَرًّا إِلَّا مَا شَاءَ اللَّهُ وَلَوْ كُنْتُ أَعْلَمُ الْغَيْبَ لَاسْتَكْثَرْتُ مِنَ الْخَيْرِ وَمَا مَسَّنِّيَ السُّوءُ إِنْ أَنَا إِلَّا نَذِيرٌ وَبَشِيرٌ لِقَوْمٍ يُؤْمِنُونَ. O Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, I possess no power of benefit or hurt to myself except as what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wills. If I had knowledge of ghaib, unseen, I should have secured for myself an abundance of wealth, and no evil should have touched me. I am but a warner and bringer of glad tidings unto people who believe. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam himself was not the one who had the knowledge of ghaib. So that's to be very clear. He only had the knowledge what Allah gave him. Second thing, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded and mentioned about the mu'mineen, the believers, how their action should be. وَمَا كَانَ لِمُؤْمِنٍ وَلَا مُؤْمِنَةٍ إِذَا قَضَى اللَّهُ وَرَسُولُهُ أَمْرًا أَنْ يَكُونَ لَهُمُ الْخِيَارَةُ مِنْ أَمْرِهِمْ وَمَنْ يَعْصِ اللَّهَ وَرَسُولَهُ فَقَدْ ضَلَّ ضَلَالًا مُبِينًا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, it is not fitting for a believer, man or woman, that when Allah and His Messenger has decided something, to have any choice but to follow Allah and His Messenger. And whosoever disobeys Allah and His Messenger, then for sure they are on clear deviation. So remember these two in reference to the discussion about what Rasulullah said about Uthman bin Affan during the time of the fitna that was going to come. Rasulullah mentioned in one of the hadith, he says, "Man naja min thalathin faqad naja thalatha marrat. موتي والدجال لي وقتلي خليفة مستبر بالحق معطيه." Says whoever is saved from three things is indeed saved. What are those three things? My death of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Meaning he is not the one who will go away from the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay. Then it goes on with Dajjal and the fitna of Dajjal. The Dajjal comes and how the people will behave at that time. And the murder of a Khalifa who is persevering, mustabir, and he is adhered to the truth and fulfilling his duty. Whatever Allah gave him, so he do the ta'ah. Okay, and that's what was referring to Uthman bin Affan, as we will see in other ahadith of Rasulullah, because Rasulullah was talking about a Khalifa, specifically a Khalifa who will be killed. Okay, because of he will be persevering, whatever was commanded to him, he will continue to do that, and he will be doing the ta'ah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The other hadith says that يُقْتَلُ فِيهَا هَذَا الْمُقَنَّعُ يَوْمَئِذٍ مَظْلُومًا. The one who is covering his head will be killed unlawfully in that day. And when it was looked at who Rasulullah was pointing to, the one who was covered, that was Uthman bin Affan radiallahu anhu. So it was mentioned by Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam about Uthman bin Affan, what is going to happen to Uthman bin Affan. Similarly, another hadith which is mentioned by Ka'ab bin Ujra, he says that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioned some turmoil of fitna. That says, ذكر Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam fitnatan faqarrabaha. That mentioned some turmoil and gave the impression that it would soon come to pass. But then he mentioned a man passed by with his head covered, and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, on that day this man will be following right guidance. And I rushed and grabbed Uthman by the upper arm. Then I turned to face Rasulullah sallallahu and said, this man? He said, yes, this man. Talking about Rasulullah, Uthman is the one who will be killed, the one who was covered by at that time. So talking about that fitna, the day of the fitna. Similarly, another hadith talks about, which is reported by Murra al-Bazi, says, I was with Rasulullah and and one of the narrators of the hadith said, Rasulullah said, that تهج فتنة كالصياصي فهذا ومن معه على الحق. There will be a turmoil, there will be a fitna like the horns of cows. But this man and those who are with him will be following the truth. And I went and grabbed the man that Rasulullah was pointing to. And that was again Uthman bin Affan radiallahu anhu. So Rasulullah mentioned many things about the turmoil that's going to happen in the time of Uthman radiallahu anhu. Now, another hadith that says that it was narrated by Abu Lashab. He said, many people stood up to give speeches in Baytul Maqdis during the governorship of Muawiyah. And the last one to speak was Murrah bin Ka'ab, who said, were it not for a hadith that I heard from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, I would not have stood up to speak. I heard that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam mention a fitna that was close at hand. And then a man whose head was covered passed by, and he said, هَذَا يَوْمَئِذٍ وَأَصْحَابُهُ عَلَى الْحَقِّ وَالْهُدَى. On that day, this man and those who are with him will be following the truth and the right guidance. Meaning whoever will be Uthman and the man himself, because they looked at the person who was covered, that was Uthman bin Affan radiyallahu anhu. And now, who are the trustworthy one on his companion, Uthman bin Affan? It is narrated that Abu Habiba that he entered the house when Uthman was being besieged. This is the time when the siege. As I said, we'll talk about this more detail when it will come the time discussing the subject. I'm just only talking about what Rasulullah said during the time when Rasulullah was there, and it was mentioned about Uthman bin Affan. As the chronological order we are going through, that Uthman's life before prophethood, then during the prophethood, and then Abu Bakr and Uthman, Umar, and his own time of Khilafah. Now, he said that I heard Rasulullah said, you will face fitna and differences after I'm gone, or differences in turmoil. One of the people said to him, who could help us, Rasulullah? He said, you should be with the trustworthy and his companions. And he pointed to Uthman and he said to him. So Rasulullah mentioned about the fitna and which person are the one you should be with at that time. And now about the Uthman bin Affan radiallahu anhu, what he was aware of that Rasulullah told him. One of the hadith that says Rasulullah sent for Uthman bin Affan and Rasulullah went to him and spoke with him. When he saw Rasulullah, he turned to one another, and last thing he said to him when he struck him on the shoulder and said, "Oh Uthman, Allah will give you a garment, okay, and wear it," which was the Khilafah. So if the Munafiqeen want you to shed it, meaning want to take the Khilafah away from you, so as I said, do not shed it until you meet me, which is Uthman will become the Khalifa. Of course, it has to be after Rasulullah is gone. So Rasulullah said to Uthman, the command was, they will try to take the Khilafah away from you, but don't give it up until you meet me, meaning they will martyr you or you will be killed. Uthman, Allah will give you a garment to wear. So if the hypocrites, Munafiq, want you to shed it, do not shed it until you meet me. And Nu'man said this is about the mother of the believer, that Aisha radiallahu anha. Nu'man asked her that why didn't you mention this hadith before? Because this hadith, one of the reporters is Aisha radiallahu anha. So she said, I forgot it, and by Allah, I did not remember it. He said, I narrated it to Muawiyah bin Abi Sufyan, and he did not approve of this hadith. He asked, if Aisha radiallahu anha said it, you have to get the writing from her. So he wrote to Aisha radiallahu anha, asking her to write to him, and she wrote to him about this hadith of Rasulullah. Now about this, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as one of the hadith that says, it was narrated from Abu Sahla, that Aisha radiallahu anha said, Rasulullah said, Ud'u li ba'da ashabi, call one of my companions from me. I said, Abu Bakr. Aisha said, no. Rasulullah said, no. Aisha said, Uthman. And Rasulullah said, yes. So when Uthman came to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then he started talking to Uthman, and And he asked Aisha first to move away. And now he started talking to Uthman. And he was talking to Uthman radiallahu anhu, Rasulullah was talking to him in a low voice. She could not hear. It does not say could not hear, but he moved her away, and now he's talking to Uthman. And Uthman radiallahu anhu, colors start changing when Rasulullah was talking. And then when this fitna started, when he was besieged, so he was asked, O Amir al-Mu'mineen, will you not fight? He said, no. Rasulullah gave me some advice, and I am going to persevere with it. Because Rasulullah commanded Uthman when this incident happened, you should not fight back. Okay, now, about this, and you will find that there were Sahaba who advised Uthman at that time to fight back. And Uthman radiallahu anh, he declined to fight back. Now, today we can think of this way, or people can come up and say there was things that Uthman should have done. But Uthman radiallahu anh was doing what he was commanded by Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as we know of what we have the ahadith. So he was the one sticking with this command, وَمَا كَانَ لِلْمُؤْمِنٍ وَلَا مُؤْمِنَةٍ إِذَا قَضَى اللَّهُ وَرَسُولُهُ أَمْرًا أَن يَكُونَ لَهُمْ الْخِيَارَةُ مِنْ أَمْرِهِمْ. That when Allah, it is not fitting for a believer that when Allah and His Messenger have commanded something, that he thinks he has a choice in it. وَمَنْ يَعْصِ اللَّهَ وَرَسُولَهُ فَقَدْ ضَلَّ ضَلَالًا مُبِينًا. And whosoever disobeys Allah and His Messenger, they are on a clear deviation. So Uthman bin Affan radiallahu anh, he acted as he was commanded by Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So he persevered. See, even so, when people talk about, think of it as I was saying, in current society and the culture and the world, the secular world, people think of shyness and modesty as a weakness. Look, this is, when we think of it, the one who's the most sincere in his the modesty, or the haya. Shyness is not the right word for modesty anyways, haya. Modesty probably is the closest one. So he's modest because of the fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Very same fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not deter him away to save his life or to shed the other people's the blood in his own protection, because he knew of what Allah Rasulullah commanded him at that time. And he was following the command of Rasulullah at that time. And hence he even gave up his life, and he did not allow anybody else's blood to be shed at that time. That's what Uthman bin Affan was. So when we think of the modesty is in the fear of Allah Azza wa Jalla, what he had. Not because of anything else. Not the weakness as today people think of it, as a person who's shy or modest. Rather, it was because of fulfilling the commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we see that as Rasulullah talked about him, what is going to happen in the future, he persevered and he did not do anything but what Allah, Muhammad commanded him at that time. So inshallah, we'll start today's talk. As I said, some of those things will be discussed today about what Rasulullah mentioned about Uthman bin Affan. And next week, we will talk about his life during the era of Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anh. What was his role, what he did during the Khilafah of Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anh. So if there is any questions or comments about the subject covered today, inshallah, I will try to answer them. So we'll stop the talk today here, inshallah.